Hi, welcome to another very special episode of the Fancy Scientist podcast. If this is your first time tuning in, this one is different. It's actually a recording from my free training for anyone who wants to go into wildlife, conservation, environmental careers, ecology, zoology. It's called the Becoming a Wildlife Professional free training series. And it is going on right now. There's one last training that's going to air live Thursday, October 16th at 5 p.m. So this is a replay of the second one, and I'm not going to reveal too much because in the training I detail exactly what we're going to cover, but it is mostly focused on understanding how to get to where you want to go. In the last training, we started to identify what you want to do and why it's so important to get specific. This training is all about the how to get there. Now, these trainings, they're only going to be on the podcast and YouTube and available to anyone until October 23rd. So you want to make sure that you watch them before then. I take them down because I want to make sure that you guys watch them. I only do these trainings about 3, maybe 4 times a year. This is my best free advice, so you do not want to miss it. Make sure that you watch these trainings. You'll also want to make sure that you are officially enrolled in the trainings, meaning that you're on the email list. Because, like I said, we have one more session that's live. When you attend live, you get to interact with me. The energy of the Zoom room is amazing. But when you're on the email list, you'll also get access to the workbooks that I've created to accompany the trainings. These workbooks are essential because they let you take a deep dive into yourself to understand really what it is you want and to start creating a plan to go after it. So make sure that you get the workbooks. And then also, I am doing giveaways, not only on the live sessions, because I understand not everyone can attend live, that there's different time zones. My audience is from all over the world. So I'm also doing some giveaways just with the email list. Go to fancyscientist.com/3, the number 3s, hyphen pillars hyphen 2 hyphen success. And if you're on YouTube, you'll be seeing this on the screen. If you're listening on the podcast, you can head over to the show notes, and the link is in the show notes. Without any more delay, let's get right into this free training. What we are talking about tonight is we're going to be focusing a lot on experience. And more importantly, we're going to be talking about strategy, but you'll find out that a big component of strategy is experience. And a lot of people resonate with what I call this paradox of experience, where you need experience to get a job, but you don't have a job, so you can't get experience. And we're going to talk about how to break that cycle. And in fact, that was my email from the other day, breaking that cycle. And without going broke in volunteering or paying for programs, paying to volunteer. So this is what we're mostly going to focus on tonight. And then next time on Thursday, we are going to talk about job applications. That's another big struggle that people have, where they are submitting hundreds and hundreds of jobs, and maybe you're not submitting that many, but it is like literally not an exaggeration that people do that. Or at least they say that. I've seen posts in all sorts of Facebook groups, on Twitter, when more people were using Twitter. I don't see as many posts on Twitter related to my field because a lot of scientists left Twitter. But anyway, people would post that they're applying to hundreds and hundreds of jobs and not getting any interviews. So we're going to focus on this in depth in this training. And then I also mentioned that I do this group mentoring program. We're going to go over the details of that group mentoring program, but more importantly, like how to put all this stuff together, how to put it into place, like how I do this with my students because with these trainings are already a lot. They run at least an hour. And then to really go into these pillars, I've developed a 17-week program, and each training for the program is roughly, I think the shortest one is 30 minutes, and then the longest ones are an hour and a half. So there's just so much to go into this wildlife field. And when I first started creating programs, I first did like a test with 6 weeks where I thought that was enough, but I just kept on adding to it because people would have questions and I realized I didn't cover this, I didn't cover that. So there's just like so many ways to, well, there's so much stuff to know about this field and this career, but there's also ways to be really effective and to do things that other people aren't doing. And I want to point something out. So right now we have 58 people here. The last time we had close to 100. Every time I do a training, and this is true of like all train, it's not just my trainings, it's true of trainings I go to. I model these off of things that I've attended to. I have invested into free programs and paid programs. And eat both situations, people start off strong. It's kind of like if you think about like New Year's Eve, like people are like, yeah, I want to get my goal and everything, and they work really hard, they go to the gym and they put in the work, but then it gets hard. It gets hard to keep up that momentum and that motivation, and people start dropping off. So if you are here, that is amazing. And you are doing things that most people do not do. I really genuinely mean that. I cannot even tell you how many people that I have. I used to have this free program, and it was about job applications, and people would tell me they struggle with their job applications, and I would say do the program, it will help you a lot, and they just never get around to doing it. I will check in with them a month later or several weeks later, or with my program, I've done some scholarships with people where I've given them this group mentoring program. They've applied for it, they filled out everything, they said they wanted to do it, and then they never opened up the program. So you're putting in the work and it really truly makes a difference. So I want you to pat yourself on the back if you're here, if you're watching the replay. Like it really, these things really do make the difference. And I've proven it with the success that I've had in getting jobs after I've had my first stumbling block when I graduated with my PhD, and my students, they keep getting jobs with this advice. As a reminder, it's only up until midnight, October 23rd, and this is to give you a deadline so that you watch them. So that you do this when you know something's going away, that you can't access it anymore, then it puts a fire under your butt and you will do it because you won't have access to them anymore. So this is honestly to help you guys. And then remember, stay on till the end and we'll do some giveaways. I have these master classes. They're hours of content to help you overcome overwhelm, is to help you with all of the things, with organizing all of the things. In my PhD, I had so much to do and it was so hard to manage my time. And even now, like it's the same thing. So these are all the principles and tools I use. Resume revamp is how to write a successful resume or CV for our wildlife careers. And then networking for it's called networking for introverts, but it's for everyone. It's really about an online networking, which I think is even better than regular networking. I think it's better than in-person networking, and it can lead to in-person networking. Sorry, somebody was calling me. Just a quick recap from last time. It is so important for you to know what you want to do in a wildlife career. So many of you say things like, well, I'll just take whatever I can get. And I understand that. I understand that philosophy, especially when you're starting out. And you might have to be more flexible. We'll talk about this tonight. You might have to be more flexible when you're starting out, that you're not going to be able to be super choosy if you have no experience, but you don't want to use that philosophy of taking whatever you can get as you get older in this career, as you advance in this career, because what's going to happen is one of two things. You're going to depend on chance to take you down your career path, and you could end up really unhappy. You could end up doing something that you don't want to do or you don't enjoy. So it's kind of like, oh, like I'll just take the next thing, take the next thing, take the next thing, and then before you know it, you're in a job you don't like. I talk to a lot of people who do that. They just do the steps that their professor said, and they're in a PhD and they're really miserable. Or you could end up getting a lot of general experience, like you've done work in birds, you've done work in amphibians, you have some consulting experience, and people think, oh, that's great, that makes me really competitive. But for most jobs it actually doesn't, because what you've seen from my path is that the person who gets the job is usually the one who has the most experience for it. So if you're applying to a bird job, they want somebody with bird experience. And if somebody has like a lot of bird experience and you only have a little bird experience, then the person with a lot of bird experience is probably going to get the job. So you want to figure out like what piece of the wildlife, ecology, conservation pie that you want, and then you mold yourself to fit that piece. And today we're going to be talking about that molding, like what is required with that molding. So working backwards is the most effective and certain way to get paid wildlife jobs. Another thing that I think I did touch upon in the first training, but I don't think I explicitly said, is that when you work backwards, when you start with the job tracker to look at the workbook, and I mentioned part of your workbook homework is to look at the job tracker, is to do the job tracker. When you start doing the job tracker, you'll also get a sense of how competitive and how frequent the jobs are. I talked about my experience working on elephants, and then people saw me as an elephant researcher. And you can 100% get a job working in elephants in the United States. They're most often zoo jobs or professor jobs. But both of those jobs, professor jobs are super hard to get. And zoo jobs are hard to get too, zoo research positions, but they're also really rare. So when you start working backwards and start focusing on like what kinds of jobs that you want and identifying them, you'll get an idea of like what kinds of jobs are really abundant and available, and therefore less risk averse than those that are going to be like really rare and only come up once in a blue moon. And it's okay to go after those rare jobs. I'm not saying that like if you really want to do mountain gorilla research, then you absolutely can go after that. But just know going forward that that is going to be competitive. It's going to be rare. You're probably going to have to change your lifestyle around the job rather than if you were to become a fisheries biologist, where fish are like everywhere. There's fish in the ocean, there's fish in rivers, there's fish in lakes, and fish are also game species. People eat fish, people fish for fun. So there's a lot of money in fish, and there's just more jobs in fish. So it will help you understand what jobs are more abundant, and therefore those would be easier to get than those that are rare and infrequent. At what point should you transition from whatever I get to being selective? We'll touch upon that in a graphic tonight. I have that outlined. There's no like hard and fast rule, but it'll give you some idea. And this is the first pillar, clarity, understanding what you want. So last time I used this airplane analogy. It's the first time I've ever used it. I like it. So clarity is kind of like setting the destination. Okay, like we have our plane, we're a pilot, like where are we going to go in the world? And now tonight we're going to talk about the route to get there. We're going to talk about what is the path, what is the plan. And for this, as I mentioned in the outline, experience is really key. Experience, like you're going to find out that there's three factors, but experience is the big one. Well, and I mean, they all are important, like because one of them is important, but I would say experience is probably like the hardest maybe to grasp and getting the right experience. But experience it will usually win out the other factors, having the right experience. So this is the strategy section. This is pillar number 2, strategy. You have your clarity. Now we're working on our strategy. And as I mentioned, there's 3 sections. We're going to start to work on the first, which is applicable experience. It's not just experience, it's applicable experience. So you want to have the experience that is right for the job that you are applying for. I used to base this off of my experience and my students' experience, but I somewhat recently, a couple of years ago, this paper came out, and we also have evidence from the scientific literature. So we're going to spend some time to dig in this evidence that is quantitative and objective. It's not just me and my experiences and my students. It's using surveys from a bunch of people who are in entry level positions. So it's not just me saying this, and again, like my experience and my students' experience, it's been in studies. And studies on the wildlife job market, I just want to say, are really rare. When I found this study, I started doing these trainings. I looked for more studies. They're just people aren't studying this stuff. So this is one study out of very few. There's not that many people who do research in this field. Okay. So this is the study. It came out a couple of years ago. It pays to get paid, factors influencing wildlife related employment success. I believe it's open access for everyone. Yeah, it is because I don't remember paying for it. And I no longer have a subscription now that I'm not at the museum anymore. And the results of this study, the authors declared that getting paid experience as soon as possible predicts success. So the essentially the earlier that you can get paid in wildlife careers and the more paid jobs you have, the better. And for those of you who are completely new to wildlife careers, I do have people who are in high school, or maybe you're just like unfamiliar, you're a career changer and you don't know how this works. You might be thinking like, well, don't you just get one permanent job? Like, don't you just get a job and that's paid? Like, what do you mean multiple jobs? What happens in our field is that it's really common for people to get temporary work because the nature of our field is very seasonal, at least in countries more north and south. There are strong seasons that affect wildlife. So right now here in the United States, we are undergoing autumn where it's going to start to get colder, the leaves are dropping off. It's going to be winter soon, and I'm in the Chicago area, so there's going to be a ton of snow. It's going to be freezing, and that affects wildlife. Wild birds are starting to migrate south into South America, Central and South America for the winter. Pretty soon, I'm not going to see insects anymore. Some mammals are going to hibernate, some amphibians and reptiles are going to brumate. So, what that means is that research has focused on studying those species when they're active, obviously. So, they're going to study them in spring, summer, and then into early fall. And what people will do is they will hire technician positions or internships during those seasons. So in the spring, summer, and early fall, there's a lot of work, but in the winter there are fewer jobs. And and when they hire for those positions, it's temporary. So you're just getting a job usually for a couple of months. So it's not uncommon to have like these multiple seasonal positions or multiple internships. So this is what they're talking about when they're talking about more paid employment experience. Now, I also want to set the stage for this article because I don't know this for sure, but this is at a this when this article came back or came out, there was a lot of pushback towards unpaid internships or volunteer work or just unpaid experience in wildlife. So I believe it was the intention of the authors to demonstrate that paid positions are more valuable than unpaid positions, and that employers should offer more paid positions, like that employers could take this article, this publication, and take it to their organization and say, look, paid positions are more valuable, and then use that as an argument to secure funding to pay their interns and volunteers. Because, and I want to, like, I know this is a very contentious issue, and I can tell you from being on the other end, from being an employer, when I worked at the museum, I applied for funding all the time to try to pay interns, and I only got it once. So a lot of times we are fighting for you, but the funding doesn't come through. So I just want to set the stage for that because as we're going to go through this, we'll spend some time on this, but I don't want you to think that unpaid work is not valuable. One. And they only looked at experience. We're going to talk about another factor at the end, which I think is really important, and my students have shown that that's really important as well. So stick with me here. So the overall thing that they found was that positive, significant relationships between the number of paid positions and the probability of being successful. So you were more likely to get a permanent paid position. And I think they also included graduate school in this as well, or go to graduate school, the more paid experiences that you had. And just to reiterate, I thought this was like a good talking point. One of my students, I can't remember. She was like, I actually don't remember who it was. But anyways, they were asking about a job, and I think they didn't get a job, and they were asking like why, or they were asking the reason why, and the employer said that oh no, I remember. Okay. This was before they were my student, and they were getting rejected from jobs, and the person said that they shared one of the rejection screenshots to me, and the employer said they need proven skills and experience. And this is where a lot of people go wrong because they think, like we talked about the first session, they think that courses count. They think that courses count as having skills and experience. Like if you take a mammalogy class, you might spend a weekend going small mammal trapping, like just for the experience, but nothing really happens to the data. Like you're not doing it as part of a study, so it's just practice. So what the employers need is this proven skill. So that comes with experience. That comes with having demonstrated that in a work environment. I'm just looking at the chat. Okay. We'll keep going and then we'll I'll review what's going on in the chat. So these are the results of the study, just so you can get an idea of what they look like. And again, I don't want you to think that like unpaid work is necessarily valuable because people in the study who had unpaid work did get jobs. But basically, it increases your chances a lot to have a lot of paid positions. In my opinion, this is a lot of paid positions, and we'll talk about this again. But seven, greater than seven, that's, I mean, if you have two jobs a year. So so say you have like a summer tech position and then like a winter tech position. I mean, that's like at least 3 years after undergraduate. That's a lot of temporary jobs. So I don't think you need that many, and I've seen it happen with fewer jobs. But anyway, here are the results. That here's the distribution of the number of respondents, how many jobs that they had. Most people had in, like between 1 to 3 jobs. And so you can see here, this is just like a pretty cool graphic of the results that for the people who had paid positions only. So if we look at this section, I think this only includes this yellow section here. I don't think it goes farther than that. Paid positions only, they were successful. If you had a combination of paid and unpaid positions, you were successful. But people who had unpaid positions only, they tended to, I mean, you do have some success. So there is some people who made it into the successful pile, but you're more likely to be in the unsuccessful pile. And the reason why getting paid experience is so important is not because employers are not looking at whether you're paid or not. I've never heard of an employer caring about that. And a lot of people actually make the mistake of moving their volunteer positions to a separate section. You do not want to do that. It doesn't matter if you're paid or not. It's work. You're doing work. What the paid experiences do is they supposedly give you more skills that are valuable for the jobs, what the jobs want. So if we look at the paid positions only, they tend to give you a higher number of skills. Eight looks like there's a lot in 8, 6, 5, etc. And you can see it's kind of hard to see, but as the lines, if you as you move down, you can see like for the paid positions, there tends to be fewer skills. For the unpaid positions, there's a thin line going to 8 skills, and the lines get thicker for like more like two skills, like 1 skill. And a combination of paid and unpaid, there's large diversity, but a lot of those get the seven or get they're not in numerical order. Get the get seven or get these higher number of skills. So the skills are what's important. And to go back to the first training, well, before I get to that, so the skills that were correlated with employment success that the study found out were scientific writing, data analysis, stakeholder communication. Those were the main skills. This is just a table showing the skills that they quantified. But again, it depends on what you want to do. If you want to work in education, then having outreach environmental education skills is really important. But if you want to work in research, then these skills are not going to help you. I mean, it's not bad that you have them, and sometimes you just need to get your foot in the door. But you really want to focus on, if you want research jobs, you really want to focus on like data analysis, field techniques, probably scientific writing, etc. Stakeholder communication is huge for a lot of jobs. That is huge. You should, I recommend, I mean, I would say this to you guys. I normally don't like do blanket recommendations, but do pay attention to the jobs that you want in the job tracker. But so many jobs ask for stakeholder communication. But again, these were unlikely to be acquired in unpaid positions. But as I mentioned, this is likely not the whole picture. And there's a couple of things that you can do about this. So first, if you have an unpaid position, try to get the skills that you want for the jobs that you want. So just ask. If you're in an unpaid position and you want data analysis skills, ask your employer, ask the people you're volunteering under, say, like, this is a skill that I would love to get. Are there opportunities for me in this position to be able to get them? And say, like, you'd be willing to volunteer or do, do some extra volunteering to get these skills. But that's one thing you can do. You can ask to get these skills. But more importantly than that, I strongly, strongly suspect that it's not about the number of positions. It's about your how well you write your application so that you are selling the skills that you have. So here's what I think is going on. I think when you have 7 to 9 positions or 7 or more positions, that even if you don't write a really good job application, because you have so many positions, the employers and you're simply listing more things in your resume and stuff, that employers can see that you have what it takes to get the job done. But what I find with people who can't get interviews is that they undersell themselves. They say they don't have enough experience, but a lot of people don't even include their volunteer jobs. A lot of people don't include all of the things that they've done at their jobs. A lot of people don't write it in a way that is compelling, that really fully shows what they do. In other words, people have these skills, they have the experience, but they're not communicating it on their job application. So I'm getting a little ahead of myself on the next training, but make sure that you come to the next training because we're going to talk about this more. I have found that with my students, they have gotten permanent jobs with fewer paid positions. To me, 7 to 9 jobs seems like a ton to get a permanent job, and you can definitely do it with fewer paid jobs. So again, make sure that you come to the next training. We'll talk about this more in depth. So is this making sense to you guys? Let me read the chat. Okay, in the US, a seasonal neon tech position is a great way to get experience. I'm still here, unable to find a non-seasonal job. Okay, take it with a okay. I'm on my fourth paid tech position 3 years out of undergrad. Yeah. And don't be hard on yourself. There's nothing wrong with getting tech positions. That's what our field does. Like you're going to I've only seen one case where somebody has landed a job that I worked with immediately. Well, actually, no, okay, sorry. Yeah, one case where she landed a permanent job. Other people have landed tech jobs right away, but a permanent job. And I'm pretty sure she had seasonal jobs. Yeah, she had seasonal jobs before that too. So I don't think it's possible, honestly, to just like go in and land a permanent job unless it's a field really in demand. Maybe like I just did a podcast interview that should be out maybe think next week or the week after that. If you're working in environmental engineering, I talked with Patrick Rainey of Ducks Unlimited, and he talked about how they can't even fill those jobs. So maybe a job like that, where you're working in environmental engineering, you can get a job immediately afterward. But yeah, you're gonna have to do tech work, and that's like totally normal. I can't even get a seasonal job. That's also okay. Don't worry about it. That's why you're here. And this is what I'm helping you with. And also, I just want to remind you guys, it's hard to get jobs to line up too. So, one of my friends in graduate school, she had her master's and she worked at Starbucks after she had her master's because she was still working on getting a permanent job. And she took tech jobs even after having her master's as well. It's just hard to get things to line up. It's competitive out there, but that's why you're here and we're working on this. Is it more beneficial to do the same seasonal job over for a few years or different jobs to get different skills. That a question like that would require mentoring because I would need to know details on the job, on what you're getting in the job, on where you want to go, on all the other jobs that you've had. So it would be really hard to just answer that here. I've been having okay, you guys are having lots of questions. So let's keep going and then we'll come back. I've been having trouble finding a tech job that does data analysis. Sorry, I just got caught up. Yeah, if you're having a hard time finding those jobs, too, again, ask for what you want. If you're collecting data for the job, express interest to your employer, to the person that you're working for, and say, I'd love to get the opportunity to do some data analysis. Do you have something that I could work on, that I could help out with? Like ask for what you want. It's okay. What's the worst that could happen? They say no. So we'll talk more about this, but I just wanted to share with you Christina Weber. Follow her on LinkedIn or connect with her on LinkedIn. She's super nice. She was one of my students. She had no wildlife experience at all. She was a dog walker. She had a dog walking company for a couple of years, and she volunteered with horses. So, not wildlife. She did some domestic animal work. And this past summer, she had, I think, four offers, it looks like. Yeah, it looks like, or she had multiple interviews, and I know she had multiple offers, and she had no wildlife experience at all. But she put in the work with both her applications and she networked a lot as well. So you don't even need wildlife experience to get jobs. Now these are not permanent jobs. These are starter jobs. These are tech positions, but still. And some of them, I think the internship was unpaid, but she definitely took a paying job this summer. Okay. So one of the ways to break through this is your job applications, which we're going to talk about next time. But another way to break through this is so say I'm gonna skip ahead, but like your job applications are perfect. There's nothing else you can improve in your job applications, and you're still like you say you just genuinely need more experience, that you can't apply for jobs because they ask for certain kinds of experience. So how do you get this experience? This is what I call the paradox of experience. You need experience to get a job, but you can't get a job because you don't have the experience. So first, before we get into this, I just want to take some time and again, set the stage, talk about mindset. Wildlife careers, so you guys, we talked about this with tech positions. You don't just get a degree and get a wildlife job. Maybe 20 years ago, 30 years ago, that's what happens, but it's not what happens anymore. And I told you guys in the last training that I used to want to be an actress. And when I decided I wanted to work in wildlife, I was so relieved because I was like, oh my God, I don't have to go on auditions. I don't have to be rejected all the time. And the stereotype for actors is that they like wait tables, and then at night they're in a off Broadway play, making no money in that, or they're volunteering doing that, or in community theater or something. But wildlife jobs are actually really similar to theater. There's a lot of parallels between them. And yeah, so wildlife careers are different. They're not like even though I felt this sense of relief when I did study abroad and I decided I wanted to be a wildlife biologist, what I realized is that they're a lot like acting careers. There's a lot of unpaid positions, low pay positions. You probably are going to have to volunteer. We're going to talk about this, and they're competitive. So, so just this is the nature of the field. And right now we can, fight to make change, but this is just the way it is right now. And to be honest, it's going to be hard to change because fields like this are fields of passion. It's kind of like art. You know, like we would love to just like for there to be more money in art, but art, just the way that our society views art and our society loves art, you know, like there's movies and stuff like that and everything, but it's just not paid in the same way as other careers, as like an engineer or, you know, as like a surgeon or something like that. So it's just the way it is. And I'm sorry, I'm just the messenger. And again, like I'm not saying we don't fight for change, but even with change coming from institutions, it's not like, at least in the near future, we're not going to see an influx of money from the government to fund conservation work. I totally wish it was different because I think this is so important, but it's just the way that our society views this kind of work. So, so this is what the careers are like. So we just have to accept this is how it is. And like I said, it doesn't mean like we don't improve the situation, but what I want is I don't want you guys to feel bad about yourselves. So like somebody was saying they're working at Dunkin' Donuts. Like if you have to work a barista job or work at Uber or, you know, DoorDash and stuff like that to make ends meet, like don't feel bad about yourself. This is a career like theater where you might have to wait tables and do some volunteer work until you can get your footing and get a permanent job. And I know I think it's hard for us too because as a society, I think we understand like, oh, if you want to become an actor, then you're going to be waiting tables. So people think that's kind of normal. But in our field, people do expect, like me and maybe your parents, I've heard a lot of people say, like, well, my parents don't understand, like I have this degree. And we're also told in our field too, like, oh, it's a STEM career. When I was in my postdoc, everything was about STEM careers. Like we got to push STEM careers. That's where all the money is. That's where all the jobs are. And it's like, well, I'm in a STEM career and I can't get a job. So it's just our field is just different. It's more of like a passion field, like art, like writing, where we just don't get paid as much, or like the humanities, things like that. Okay, so you will most likely have to volunteer. I'm sorry. I know that's frustrating to hear. And this has been the case for a long time. Like I said, maybe 20, 30 years ago, you could get a job right away. But most people, even that long ago, a lot of people started out volunteering. But it doesn't mean you have to do unpaid internships. It doesn't mean you have to like devote your life to volunteering. Or if you do an unpaid internship, you can do Uber or DoorDash at night or on the weekend to support yourself. But you don't have to do a 9 to 5 volunteering. You don't have to devote your entire working hours to volunteering. I really, really, really don't think you should pay to volunteer unless you are sure that experience will give you what you want and you vet the program very well. There's a podcast episode I did with Matt Snyder where we talk about this. His pay to volunteer position did end up paying off, but I think most of them are not going to give you what you want to be competitive in the job market. And it for sure doesn't mean you need to volunteer forever or be taken advantage of by organizations or employers. So just some things that you can do if you are early in your career that make it easy to volunteer. This is what I did when I first decided I wanted to go into this career. I found out I was a senior in college. You can volunteer for a couple of hours in a lab at your university. And you can get research credit for that. You can get college credit for that. So that's a great way to volunteer and not devote your life to volunteering. And it's an academic experience as well. And your university might have a work study program. When I was at the museum, the I worked under a professor, or I worked under the director of the biodiversity lab, but he was also a professor at NC State University, and they had a work study program. So some of the people in our lab were part of the work study program, so they got paid to do work in our lab. They essentially did the same work as interns, as unpaid interns. We had unpaid interns at the time. I think the museum has changed that, but they essentially did the same work and they got paid for it. So look into your university. There might be a situation like that. And I know our field feels very unfair, but most professions actually do have unpaid internships. In fact, when I took a when I invested in a course slash coaching program by somebody who ran their own business and their business generated hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, she had unpaid internships. So it's really common for businesses, profit organizations to have unpaid internships. The teachers I worked with, they not only did not get paid well, but they had to pay for their own professional development. Doctors, lawyers, vets. My best friend, she's a vet. I don't even think she started paying for actually for her student loans. I don't even think she actually has started paying the loan back. I think she's only paid the what's the word? The principal on it. She hasn't even started paying the loan back. That's like how much money she owes. So yeah, she gets paid well now, but she's in debt hundreds of thousands of dollars for vet school. Our field, for if you get a research thesis, a master's thesis, or a PhD, I didn't pay to go to graduate school. In most cases, they waive your tuition and you get a stipend. So they paid me to go to graduate school. And again, this doesn't mean these things are right, but I just want you to feel like you're not so alone, that there's crappy things that happen in a bunch of other different fields as well. And this is all temporary. So you're not going to have to volunteer forever. That, if you really want this career, then this again is the reality of it. And this is how to get to the next step is usually almost always you have to volunteer at first, unless you can find something like a work study program. So this is temporary. And you can do it. This is a post I saw from Outside with Lyra a long time ago, or not that long ago. I think it was last year. I don't know why I said a long time ago. But, she really wanted it. She's an educational environmental influencer. And this post was about her struggle she's not just an influencer, sorry. She actually works at a park. I'm not sure of her official job title, but she's employed. She's in the UK. I think, yeah, she works for one of their parks there. So she's in the environmental field. And, she talks about this. It's ship paid, requires loads of experience, and it's risky. She talks about the pressure to make money. She came from a low income family, single mom, worrying about making her ends meet, but she made it. She said she volunteered. Every single penny counted. So I just want to say, I mean, this is like her inspirational post that it's not easy, but you can do it. So people whenever I struggle with something or I feel like something cannot be done, I always look for evidence that it can be done. And a short story just to exemplify this, years ago people would say that you can't do you can't run a mile in 4 minutes. And then once the first person did that, I should probably know his name because I share this story. But once the first person did that, that year, something like four other people ran a 4 minute mile. So when you see that other people can do it, it means you can do it as well. So to break the paradox of experience, you have to start out somewhere. So just start out volunteering, getting any experience. This is the section where you don't want to start out being too specific. And if you are applying and applying and applying and not able to get any volunteering, don't worry, I still have some tips for you. We will get to that. But this point you don't want to be too specific. You just want to try to get anything. When I first started, I worked in a lab on flower beetles. Do you think I wanted to work on flower beetles? No. Do you think flower beetles had anything to do with conservation or elephants, which is what I was interested in? No. I mean, I guess they were under the realm of animals and ecology because I worked in an ecology lab. So you got to start out somewhere. And then just going back to that study, they also mentioned that hiring managers prefer applicants who have experience, but also you want to try to get those good recommendations. That was also something that was really important for getting jobs, getting good recommendations. So you just want to get your sea legs. You want to start getting those recommendations. You want to start getting anything somewhat wildlife related that you can put on your resume. And then as you move forward, so you've started using the job tracker, you're understanding the job inside and out. Then you can start building, like once you start volunteering, you're going to think about it as like stepping stones. And then you're going to start getting more specific experience. And you're going to start filling in the gaps to what you need to get your job experience. So basically, you're going to start out broad and then you're going to get narrow. So say you want to work in pollinator conservation. You want to work conserving pollinators. So you start out and maybe you're just getting like any job down here. Maybe it's an environmental education position. Maybe it has nothing to do with pollinators even. Maybe it's at a zoo. Maybe you're just working in a zoo getting environmental education experience. Okay, so that got you in the door. Then your next job, maybe you want to start getting some field work. And maybe it's not on pollinators, maybe it's on birds or something. And then like keep your eye on the job. So like what kind of experience you need? Well, you're going to need some pollinator experience. So maybe the next job then you try to get is working with pollinators. Maybe you need some stakeholder experience. So maybe for your next job, maybe it doesn't have anything to do with pollinators, but maybe you take a job where you can get some experience. Maybe it's not even in the conservation field. Maybe like you decide to work for a nonprofit or volunteer for a nonprofit to get some sort of experience working with stakeholders or fundraising. A lot of nonprofit jobs care about fundraising. So maybe your mom works with St. Jude's, which is not an animal nonprofit, but it's for children with cancer. So maybe like she can get you an opportunity to work with their communications department to work on fundraising. So, like, you want to start filling in the missing pieces to give you the experience that give you the jobs that you want. So, this is how you do it. Like, you get these experiences, and it's kind of like a checklist. You'll have, like, with your job tracker, you'll know what the jobs want. And when you apply for jobs, you'll know, like, oh, I have this experience, I have that experience, I have, this experience, but I don't have this. I got to find a way to get this. And it doesn't have to be in wildlife if it's an experience that can transfer over to wildlife. Okay, so what if you truly, truly can't get anything? Like I've had people who have tried to apply for volunteering positions and they cannot get anything. You can create your own experiences through community or citizen science. You 100% can do this and put this on your resume. But you cannot do it in like a random, haphazard way for it to count. And in my group mentoring program, I teach you exactly how to do this. But like for me, I go on walks with my dogs and I take pictures of cool stuff and I upload it to iNaturalist. That's not going to help me get a job if I'm just starting out. But if I were to do eBird surveys every single week and do that for 52 weeks out of the year and take it really seriously and spend an hour doing an eBird survey, that's experience, even though you're doing it yourself. And there are so many community and citizen science experiences out there. For example, here in Illinois, there's River Watch where it literally I almost did it. I didn't do it because it was a little too time consuming at the time, but you go through a training where they teach you, it's a 5 hour training. They teach you about rivers, invertebrates in rivers, and the invertebrates are a measure of the health of the river. And then you adopt a river and you conduct surveys of the river. That is experience. Do you have to apply for it? No, you just sign up and you're trained by scientists, or you're trained by people in the program who were trained by science. It's real science, and that's experience. You don't need anyone can do it. Like my neighbor who's not a scientist at all can sign up to do it. And check out this video. It's for the Wildlife Biology for Kids Club, which is a program that I run teaching parents. Honestly, you like I learn a lot when I make these videos. It says it's for kids, but it's really for adults too. And it's all about eBird. It's all about how to do eBird surveys. So you can, that's something every single one of you can start doing on a regular basis, is doing eBird surveys. And birders do eBird. When I went to Suriname with the curator of birds at the museum, he would do eBird surveys when we would set up camera traps. So this is stuff that real scientists do. And then network. You want to make sure that you're networking. One of my students, Hannah, she started networking with the curator of herps at our museum, and she got an internship out of it. She didn't ask for an internship. She didn't even know that they had internships at the museum, or she didn't even yeah, she just didn't know anything about it. But if you start networking and talking to people, and you can directly ask for experience too, and this is exactly what I teach in networking for introverts, you can get experience in this way. You can cold email people. I teach this in LinkedIn for wildlife careers and networking for introverts, how to reach out to people, how to ask them for experience. So this is the second pillar of the strategy circle, intentional connections. Reach out to people on a regular basis. This is what also gets you jobs, is networking. And again, a lot of people think that networking is super important. It is, I should say it is super important, but a lot of people think that networking gets you jobs. It can, but still, in my experience is important, more important. I've interviewed for jobs where I already worked with people, I already knew people, and those with more experience still got the job. But you still want to network. So, in the homework, in the workbook, you're going to do an assessment of how often are you networking. I remember during COVID, during the pandemic, I would ask people if they're networking, and they're like, "Of course not. Like, we're on lockdown. How can I network?" You can network every single day on LinkedIn or sending emails to people. You don't need to go anywhere. This is like, there's no excuses. When I was, in my 20s, you couldn't, I mean, we had email, but like, it was really hard to like find people's emails, and like at LinkedIn for sure wasn't around. Like, you can connect with people instantly. It is so easy nowadays. So yeah, you can be networking with somebody every single day. Some more questions for you to ask yourself in the workbook. I'll let you guys do that, but here's some ideas, some inspiration. I talk about this in details in my masterclass, LinkedIn for Wildlife Careers. Are you advertising yourself? And by advertising, I don't mean like, please help me find a job, or I can't get a job. Somebody let me know where I can get a job. But are you making yourself look like somebody who is doing really cool stuff, and and taking science seriously? And again, you don't have to have an official title. Migration's happening right now. I can do an eBird survey, and I can take pictures of birds, post them to LinkedIn, talk about cool species I saw, That's like a professional post. You know, we're in science. I'm doing eBird, it's migration. That's a professional post. So are you doing things like that? So when you do apply for jobs or when you cold network, people are like, wow, this is somebody who really cares about conservation, who's somebody who's really going above and beyond to put the work in to help wildlife to improve themselves. Like are you doing Merlin bird ID to learn bird songs? Anyways, look at the workbook. It will give you a bunch of ideas and it will allow you to assess yourself. And if you said no to any one of those, then you're severely limiting your success because there are people out there who want to help you. I I'm not going to say make my students network, but I highly encourage them to network. And they always get people who respond positively back to them, who meet with them for lunch, who go to coffee with them, who put them in connection with people who are writing grants and get jobs too, like literally get jobs. So this again is Christina. She had so much success, it was crazy, and she had no wildlife experience. She cold emailed somebody, and this person called her. So she never applied for an internship, but she cold emailed somebody and she attached her resume because that's what I tell my students to do. The person at the aquarium put the resume in the internship applications and they asked if she would like to interview for an internship at the aquarium. And again, she never applied for this internship. So it works. It 100% works. It also worked for my student Karen. Karen was a career changer. And she previously worked with domestic animals, and then she was working at a ski lodge and she wanted to switch to ecology. So she started really networking. And she really wanted to do like wetland work, especially with beavers. So she got to be part of this mentorship program. And then she also got an interview. And then, as a result of this interview, she was invited to work on a peer-reviewed publication. It's published already without being a member of anyone's lab. So she got, and publications are really important if you want to go to graduate school. So she got a peer-reviewed publication just from networking and then also now she is working, I forget her job title, but she did get a job in ecology in wetlands work. So you can just get tons of things from networking. This is somebody who she could not move, and there were just limited roles in her area, and she was working on the city council, and she was able to create her own job. So by volunteering at the city council, she eventually worked with them to set aside money so that she could be the first ever staff biologist. So so be creative. It's so much more than just applying for jobs. Like you really have to be creative and be unwilling to accept no for an answer. Like seek out all these possibilities, all these different avenues. There are people who want to help you and who need help too. Like I have so much stuff to do, but if I might not have the time to create a job posting, which I know sounds crazy, or an internship posting, or maybe I do, like I'm not saying I do, but I'm just saying like maybe there's somebody out there like they're just like ready to post a job, or like they have a lot of work to do and they have some money and they haven't had the time to post a job, and you contact them and you would say, I would love to get experience in the type of work that you do. Is there something I can help you with? And they might be like, oh my God, yes, I would love to get help doing XYZ. And they might just hire you, or they might let you volunteer with them. But they might hire you. There's been articles, science, it was either Science or Nature did an article on cold job applications, and people do get jobs out of that. That's something else I talked to Patrick about in the podcast that is coming up. Things like that happen. And then the last part of this pillar, we're not going to talk too much about this. We talk about this in depth in my program, is aligned education. For some jobs, you do need a higher degree. So you might need a master's or a PhD. There's lots of different variations and options. It literally takes, I think the master, or I think the class on this is like at least 30 minutes to an hour to talk about the different options. But just so you know, like, for some jobs, no matter how much experience you have, you might not be able to get them unless you have a master's or a PhD degree. Okay. So there are still people out there who have paid experience, who have master's degrees, who have PhDs, and this still does not work. They still cannot get jobs. I talk to these people. Why? Why do you think that
They're
is?
buying ISO right now.
Why don't you put in the chat if you know what the answer is, and I'm gonna catch up on the questions. So lump my volunteer experience with my employment experience on my resume. Yes, if you have volunteer experience and it is related to wildlife, or the experience that you have applies to the jobs that you are applying for, like using my St. Jude's example. If you have fundraising experience and you want a job in conservation and they're looking for fundraising experience, yes, add that to it counts as experience, and it doesn't matter if you're paid or not. Unless they explicitly say to put it in a separate section, or government jobs, they might have some rules about that. So make sure you follow those rules. But just like regular job resumes and CVs, you want people to see that front and center. Should the exact words be used in resume? I have cross-cultural communication in mind. Should I change that into stakeholder communication? Yes, you want to use that. That is something we'll talk about next training. If the job asks for stakeholder communication, you say stakeholder communication. Don't change it. You want to keep it, you want to speak their language. Because when somebody is applying for a job, they're busy. The employer is busy. They're scanning the resume, scanning the cover letter, looking to see if you have what the job wants. So don't make it difficult for them. Make it as easy as possible. And then also, I don't know for sure, but I don't think the conservation world is using AI as much, but there might be like scanning systems. I know in the government, human resources people would look over it. One of my friends, I remember she did not get an interview for a job because I think she used the word ornithology, and they asked for like a bird ecologist. And the human resources person did not know what ornithologist was. So she had to call to like get her position moved to the yes pile. So don't make it difficult for them. Make it easy. It's best to build experience to the jobs you want, since broad experiences and get you far. But what if you don't know your specialty yet, or you can't find jobs specific to what you've already done because your experience is broad? What do you do in the meantime while you're trying to find those specific opportunities but need steady work to stay afloat financially? Okay, so this is okay, so you can't find jobs specific to what you've done already. So I would not try to okay, so to me it sounds like you don't know what you want to do yet. That's most important, because you don't want to choose the jobs based on what you've done, because you want to find out what you want to do first, because otherwise you're just going farther down a path that you might not be happy with. So in the next training, I will talk about how I teach people how I get people to understand what it is they want to do if they don't know what they want to do. So we'll go over that in detail in the next training, but or how I teach it in my program. But very quickly, it boils down to knowing yourself and knowing all of the jobs and workplaces out there. And yeah, we'll talk about that in detail. And then what do you do in the meantime? This is like a really big question that would require mentoring, but I would think about like remember going back to the path of the stepping stones, like what things can you get that would fill in the gaps for the kinds of jobs that you want? So even if you can't get your ideal job right now, or maybe you can't even get a job in wildlife, but can you get a job where you can get some of those skills that can transfer over into the wildlife jobs that you want? But if you don't know what kind of job that you want, then you're kind of stuck because you don't know what to go towards. That's a freaky seal picture. Do you think that we have a higher chance of finding conservation jobs outside of the US? I think it's hard. I think that's a really hard question to answer because it depends on the country. But in general, I would say I talk to people from all over the world and people struggle all over the world. So I don't think that the US is harder than other areas. And then actually, I think the US might be easier than other areas. And it depends totally on what kind of job you want. If you want to work with wolves, yeah, like it's going to be really competitive. But like I mentioned earlier, if you want to be a fisheries biologist, no, you can get jobs as a fisheries biologist. Those are easier to get. There's a lot, and I talk about this in my program. There's a lot that goes into how easy or hard it is to get certain jobs. What about when none of these sort of experience pathway jobs will hire you because they think you're too specialized or something? Then you are going to have to really emphasize on your job applications that this is the job that you want and argue and this would require mentoring because I would need to know your background. I would need to know the job. It's not an easy answer, but you would need to make arguments in the context of your background and in the position that you want that this is really the job that you want. I've worked with people who've worked in the government for 15 years and they're career changers. So they're applying for like internships, but they have 15 years of experience. So you have to articulate that and advocate for yourself and like show the work that you've done towards moving towards this new career and also highlighting the experience that you've had in your previous career that would apply to this new career. But it's not a straightforward answer. We would need to work together in mentoring. Okay, considering how hard it is to get a wildlife job, can it truly help to have been to a highly rated research school like an Ivy League, not only for the reputation, but for the networking as well? I don't think it's hard to get a wildlife job depending on the job. There are some wildlife jobs that are not hard to get. So it totally depends on the job. Like I mentioned, fisheries jobs, and like I don't want to generalize, but like my students have had pretty good success getting jobs like that. So it again, it depends. I just talked to Patrick. That podcast is coming out soon. He talks about jobs that are not that hard to get. So it totally depends. But talking about Ivy League schools, I don't think Ivy League schools are important in our field, really. I don't think it matters that much. Who you know matters, yes, but it who you know matters depending on what you want to do. It always comes back down to what you want to do. If you want to become a lion biologist, then or if you want to work on lions, then you need to know Craig Packer and other top lion researchers. That's what's gonna help you get jobs, not if you go to Harvard or not. So it depends on like if what you who you know is related to what you want to do. People in our field, again, like if they might be impressed that you go to like Cornell, but not because it's an Ivy League school per se, but because they have a strong ornithology department there. So it's really about like what that school reflects. And there's a lot of schools that have a lot of really great professors that are not Ivy League. Is it easy to find those jobs that pay for masters? So I'm not sure about jobs that pay for masters, but what I was talking about in the presentation is that when you do a thesis master's collecting original research, usually here in the United States, you do not pay for it. Usually they waive your tuition and you do a teaching assistantship and you get a stipend for it. That's what happened for my PhD. They had fellowships and we got research fellowships. So, but I have heard, I haven't, I don't know of anyone who had this, but I have heard of like the government paying for masters and things like that. People make the mistake of not tailoring their applications, resumes. Yes, that is huge. I would think it might not work because of how competitive this field is and depending on what you're applying for. Can you discuss the difficulty of feeling like you have to move for employment in this field, especially when first starting out? It feels like many of the positions are seasonal, temporary, and so scattered that you have to uproot your life every 6 months. Yes, I can relate. And I did do that. I moved to Utah and then I moved back, and then I moved to Disney World, then I moved back to Buffalo, then I moved to Kenya. Luckily, with Disney World and Kenya, I it was actually not that hard to move because I did the Disney College program. It was a science program. I worked in the hormone lab at Animal Kingdom, but they had Disney apartments, so like I didn't have to like, like find a place to live. It was really easy. And same thing for Kenya. I lived at the field station. You don't have to move, but for you, I would really focus on networking in your area, and you might have to do more volunteer work and because you just might be like more limited in terms of what organizations are going to pay or not. But I would really, really emphasize networking, like reaching out to all different kinds of people in all different kinds of positions locally at the organizations that you work for. So you don't have to move. It feels like that, but you can get some really quality experience locally. I interviewed Jeffrey Hunter for my podcast. He he worked at Verizon, the phone company, for 20 years. And then he decided he wanted to become he wanted to work in wildlife at the age of 40. So he'd been working, raising a family for 20 years with Verizon. But he volunteered throughout that time because he loved wildlife. So he led like nature hikes. I think he just did like anything. I don't remember what organizations he volunteered for, but I think it was things like Sierra Club, just like local organizations. And when he got his degree, he got the second job that he applied for because he had so much volunteering experience over the course of 20 years. Now, you don't have to volunteer for 20 years, but you don't have to move. You can make it work for you. You can, like I said, like do some of these other jobs that's just paying the bills, like doing Uber. I mean, I talk to my Uber and Lyft drivers all the time. A lot of people actually quit their full-time jobs and do Uber, or it's a great thing to do when you're trying to balance different things because you can like pick up shifts all the time. Like this, I remember talking to this one guy and he's like, "Yeah, when I go to school, I will pick up shifts to take people along the way." So so yeah, you don't have to move across the country. I would really focus in on networking with local organizations, local professors, like reach out to the people directly. Don't just reach out to the organizations. Yeah, and the bird lady not knowing ornithology. Yeah. Okay, let's keep going. It looks like we have a couple more questions. Let's keep going. Okay, so even if it might not still work for you. Why? Because of your job applications. Oops, I got a little ahead of myself. But these pillars, they work like a stool. So you need all three legs for the stool to hold up. If you have the clarity and you have the strategy, if you have all the experience, but they cannot tell from your application that you have experience, or if you're not a good, or if you're not a good writer and you're not effectively conveying, or you're meek, like a lot of people are not, they're not that confident in what they have to bring. And it doesn't mean that they're not good enough. They just don't like see that in themselves. If you're holding back, then the employers are not going to see that. So if you're missing this leg, then you're not going to get the job. So that's your job application. And that is what we are going to talk about next time. So make sure that you come back on Thursday. Oops, I wrote 4 p.m. Central. I meant to say, yeah, we're doing this. Last time I did it at 5 p.m. So sorry, we're doing it at 5 p.m. Central time. So make sure you show up. I'm going to give you some concrete examples of what not to do on your resume and what to do. When I say resume, I mean CV. I use them kind of interchangeably. And then I will show you exactly how we put the pillars together in my program and how we make them work for a lifetime of success. Okay, so that is it for tonight. I'm going to do 2 giveaways, and then I have the giveaways from the email list as well. So I will be announcing those winners as well. Let me just see. I've done the work for the job tracker and was able to find specific skills. One of them is knowledge on environmental laws and regulations. Do you have any pointers on how to go about this? This would require mentoring. I would have to look at the job postings and analyze it. And I would also encourage you to network too, network with people to find that information out. I asked last time about having a degree in biology or a science related field. I have a BA in an unrelated field. Is it possible to get field work without a biology or science degree? Yes. Or is it possible, or if it's better, worth the effort to try for conservation policy or data analysis? You should be able to get, well, okay. It depends on the job. It depends on the job for the field work and like what the qualifications that they ask for. But very entry level positions that ask for no qualifications at all. Yes, you should be able to get it, but it depends on who applies. It depends on how good your application is, etc. If you're talking about the field in general, like a career in wildlife, you absolutely do not need a science degree. But depending on what you want to do, you might need a science degree depending on what you want to do, or you might need the coursework to make up for that science degree. When I was in my PhD, I had colleagues who had English degrees, who had one had a BFA in Russian and music. Somebody had a science education degree, so they were like it was an education degree, but they specialized in science. So they were a middle school teacher. So you don't need a for most jobs, again, it depends on the job. Some jobs might specifically ask for a certain kind of degree. But for most jobs, it usually says like a wildlife degree or biology or whatever, or a related degree. And then usually it says something like or a combination of coursework and experience or something like that. But if you want to go down the science route, then yes, you will probably, depending on what your degree is in, you will probably have to take science classes like physics, chemistry, etc. So you might just have to take extra courses. Ivy League comes down to the kind of connections you're making. Yeah, absolutely. Like, are the connections going to get you what you want? And that was when I was in my postdoc trying to get a permanent position. I had a really strong network, and this is also like in my program. I talk a lot about choosing your master's and your PhD research intentionally because you're building your connections. So I was always really social. I had a lot of connections on LinkedIn, but my connections were strongest in the elephant and genetics world. I didn't love genetics. I didn't want to really pursue a career in genetics. And it was difficult to find elephant jobs. So I had connections in the wrong places. So you want to make sure your connections are working for you. You guys have really good questions and comments here. For cold emailing networking, is it more effective to reach out to a specific person or organization at a time or reach out to a bunch of people at once? I would reach out to as many people as reasonably possible. Like you don't want to spam people. And I teach this if you want help with this, you can if you're not one of the winners, you can purchase networking for introverts. I think it's only $37. I give you templates, everything to say. But yeah, like I wouldn't spam everyone at an organization but I wouldn't also hold back. Like, and also it depends on how much time you have in a day and stuff. Like you don't have to do 100 in a day. You can do a little bit here and there every day. But yeah, if you really want to work at the Nature Conservancy, I would try to get as many connections as possible at the Nature Conservancy, starting with people who are local to you, like everyone who works there. I would do that. And you can write your messages in a way that, like he says, you're like, you're reaching out to everybody, or if you're asking like the same question to multiple people, you can write it in a way that you're letting them know that you're reaching out to other people at the same time. But yeah, I wouldn't hold back. Do you have any recommendations for getting GIS experience? Like I said, network, reach out to people, ask them for experience. If you're in jobs, if you're volunteering, ask your employers, ask your coworkers if you can get experience. Just ask for it. I would not pay for a course unless you research it well and or the job applications ask for courses, but I don't think courses are a great way to get experience because people want, like I showed on that one slide, they want proven experience. So they don't want a course, they want like because when you do a course, you're just doing a course. Like it depends on how good the teacher is, it depends on what the course teaches. But if you volunteer at a place and you conduct analyses on wood frog movements, you can write down your resume. You have concrete proof that you did this. Like you created the maps, you calculated the home ranges, you did X, Y, Z. So just ask for it. Start networking with people. And if you need help with that, take networking for introverts, and it provides you detail on exactly how to do that. This is going to be released on YouTube. I'll send a link as well. Where can we get suggestions for cold emailing? I explained that all in networking for introverts and also LinkedIn for wildlife careers. You can reach out to people who work at the organizations you want to work at, the type of research you want to do, the type of experience you want to get. How can I get more research experience? Should I reach out to professors? Yeah, just reach out to people again and ask. Like, just start cold networking with people. Or it can be warm networking. It can be people you already know, people you've already worked with. Like, I'm looking to get research experience. Do you have any projects I could work on? Are you able to get higher level jobs without a professional biologist designation? I'm not sure what you mean by a professional biologist designation. But yeah, usually you can get experience and move up. That's usually how it works. But certain jobs, you might need a higher degree for that. You might need a master's or a PhD. Okay. So let's do 2 giveaways. Once again, head over to the link in the show notes or the link in the YouTube description is fancyscientist.com/the #3-pillars-2-success. 3 pillars to success. So make sure you head over and get enrolled so that you can partake in the giveaways and get access to these amazing workbooks that I have created. And I'm so excited for you to join us in our final and next live training.